New Buddha Way Dharma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
Right, well, hello everyone. It seems that our workplace very often has now come into our home as well, which of course creates new challenges for us. In the past we used to think, well, the workplace was one thing and home was another. That boundary has now been mixed up for many of us, and that creates new difficulties, but possibly new possibilities as well. But it's interesting, isn't it, that of all the things that the Buddha could speak about, he included in the Noble Eightfold Path right livelihood. You probably think that he wouldn't want to talk about people's work. In fact, he was challenged by one Brahmin who said, you know, here you are waiting in a line for some food with the rest of us, but you don't actually go to work, do you? You don't actually work at all. And the Buddha said, well, actually, yes, I do. You know, my work is teaching people the Dharma, and I'm devoted entirely to that for life. So he was actually working very hard. So right livelihood. It's probably more useful to think about this now than ever before, because we could easily put workplace aside. What we do for our living could go to one side, and then home, friendships, etc., put it to another side. But since that's now, you know, being mixed up, for the good or for the bad, I don't know, right livelihood becomes suddenly quite important. The Buddha was talking about how we gain our life, how we sustain our life. We have to work in order to sustain our lives. And of course, in modern society, it's become very, very complicated. But he said a lot of things 2,500 years ago, which apply to us now, which is pretty amazing. But it does show that there are things about us human beings that don't change very much, if at all. So the workplace can become a testing ground for mindfulness, a testing ground for attachment. In fact, some of us are very unhappy at work, but do it because we need to put food on the table. Other people are very pleased with their work, especially if they feel they are reaching their own expectations about, you know, being moving up the ladder, becoming successful. What did the Buddha actually have in mind? Well, he didn't think it was very helpful for us to divide our lives into two. So we have one way of thinking when we're at work, and one way of behaving when we're at work, but then a different one when we're at home. Or the other thing that we often do, of course, is to get all wound up at work and angry and annoyed and disappointed, and then bring that home, that upset, that annoyance. And we can take it out on our spouses, our family, our friends, our dog and cat, the goldfish, just about anybody that we need to vent our frustration on. So it's no surprise that the Buddha, when he was talking to lay people and not to monastic people, he had quite a lot to say about right livelihood. So there it is. It's the fifth factor in the Noble Eightfold Path: right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. So it's given the same status as the other things. So it can't be said, you know, that the Buddha was someone who just sat cross-legged on a cushion and focusing on his breathing. That is only a way to calm the mind and to allow it to expand and think of other things that are important to us and how it all fits together. So he didn't just sit on a cushion. And Right Livelihood and what he has to say about it shows that he was actually quite au fait with what was going on in his time. And of course, in his wanderings, he would speak to anybody and everybody. It didn't matter what their work was. They could be people that were cleaners, farmers, they could be lawyers, they could be kings. He spoke to anybody and everybody. And they respected him because there was something about him. He wasn't afraid of the truth, but he didn't speak the truth in a harsh way. He did it in a compassionate way. So the fifth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is Sama Ajiva, right livelihood. So how do we live, or how do we work in the light of what we learn from the Dharma? They seem to be completely separate things. Well, we're seeking a mode or style of living or subsistence which does not cause unnecessary harm to people or animals, nor rest on exploitation or discrimination. Instead, a way of working that promotes caring, honesty, fairness, and accountable relations in all encounters with people and other living things. Now, that might sound like a tall order, but you know, it's a star in the sky to give us bearing, to give us a direction. That maybe this is how things should be. Working doesn't have to be so harmful to others. Now, many of us I know are doing work as carers, for example, which gives one opportunities which are not available if you're working in a boardroom as a chief executive for a finance company, for example. The word accountability is important, and you hear it a lot these days on television, in the news, because it seems that we are losing something called accountability. But in Dharma terms, what is accountability? What I do, what I don't do, affects other people. And insofar as it affects them, I need to tell them or speak honestly with them about that. Not hide things from them or exploit them or go behind their backs. Be accountable is to give an account, be prepared to give an account of how your work impinges on other people, on other workers, and on society at large. So climate change, for example, at work is my concern, and people should be accountable for what they're doing. And I think we're coming to see that now. Okay. So in terms of practice, where do we start? Well, one way to start is to be aware that it's a developmental thing. You know, I don't start work when I'm 3 years old, although I may be picking up quite a lot because I see daddy and mummy going out through the door and say they're going to work. It's been suggested that that's a development in us all as we go through our life experience of working. First of all, there is the naive me who goes to work, maybe got the job I want. Now I go into that with high expectations. I'm quite naive. I trust everybody. Everything seems to be cut and dried. And somewhere in the background, I'm clinging to an idea of maybe of success, of furthering myself within my workplace. So my general attitude is one perhaps of idealism about my work and hope. It's all good. But if we're honest and we look back at our lives, we notice something else creeping in over time, even from the very first job I have, and that is some disappointments. The workplace isn't what I thought it was. Now, that shouldn't be a surprise. Why? Because it's the same human beings that they were before. They don't change because they go into their workplace. So what we then start finding is that there's certain people that let one down, or one is let down by one's unreal expectations, however you look at it. And gradually, bit by bit, one starts losing trust, lowering one's expectations, and starts becoming a little bit worldly wise, if you like, and even a bit manipulative, because you now understand what the game is. You become socialized into your workplace. So you have to become like everybody else if you're going to succeed, or at least have a peaceful life at work. Now, this can then go too far. When somebody at work has stolen your idea and takes credit for it, it could be very hurtful. These sorts of things happen at work. At work, you will encounter the same kind of discrimination, if you like, within yourself that you found outside. And that is, I like so-and-so, but I don't like so-and-so. But you've got to work with them, regardless of whether you like them or not. And if you work in, say, in the NHS, you're told in your code of conduct, you have to treat everybody the same. So it doesn't matter whether your patient is a thoroughly obnoxious person that you really don't like at all, you still have to treat that person the same as anybody else. So now we're going into a second phase, which perhaps a little bit cynically we could call a manipulative phase. That is, I'm learning through the organization to change my behavior, to sustain my position, to further myself, to avoid people I don't like, to be maybe a little bit flattering to the managers. So I'm becoming a little bit manipulative. That's not because I'm a bad person, it's because I'm trying to survive in an environment which I've been thrown into. A lot of things I didn't really expect. For some reason, I thought it would be nicer at work than it would be anywhere else, but that turns out not to be true, because we're still humans, wherever we are. So we go from this naive level into a kind of worldly wise, manipulative level, trusting very few people, if anybody, and clinging to gain for myself, clinging to the avoidance of loss, perhaps creating a little cadre or group of people at work that are the in group and everyone else is the out group. So there are people I like and people I don't like. And then we say awful things about the people we don't like, of the out group, whereas we try to encourage the in group. Well, a lot of people, I think, in my view of life, seem to get stuck at this phase. Meet a lot of people who've been going to work for 20 years or so, who are pretty cynical, really, about work. Not always, I'm not saying always, but it's quite common for that to happen. I think back to myself, my father, for example, and others that I knew about where I knew about their work and what it did to them. You've probably seen that phenomenon of people being very stressed at work, and then they come home, then suddenly they're free and they can let out all the stress on everyone else around them, which of course we know is unfair, but we just can't help it because we've built up this stress and we don't know how to deal with it. Okay, well, fortunately, there is a third level, and that is what you might call an insightful or wise level about work, where we come to understand that the workplace can be a game, but I've got to hold on to something, and that is my basic decency, my basic wish for honesty, that it requires wisdom to manipulate, but well, not to manipulate anymore, but to move around in such a way as is not undermining your basic human decency. It's very sad to see someone going from being naive to being manipulative and cynical. That's not the place to stop. That's a place to wise up and say, okay, maybe I had wrong expectations. After all, human beings are going to be the same at work as they are anywhere else. What do I want from this? Or can I use my talents in a more fruitful way, a less harmful way, for example, harmful to the environment? So we become insightful, wiser, now have a wiser understanding of others and their conditions and how people suffer at work. You're not the only one that suffers at work. We suffer at work because we suffer when we're not at work, because we don't really understand ourselves or others. You know, and that is what the Dharma teaches us really, is how to live more peacefully and more cooperatively, and how to deal with disappointments, etc. Okay, so an exercise. You think of exercises. There's several of them, but one that I like is to be self-questioning about work. So we should all ask ourselves, you know, just when you've got a quiet moment, but without upsetting yourself, what do I do for a living? Or what did I used to do if I've retired? Why do I do it? Is it to collect the salary at the end of the month, or is there something else of me in it? Is it some expression of who I am? What is the purpose of what I do? That's really important. It's good if you can find work which expresses your basic decency. What is its purpose? What is the point of my employing organization? The organization, if I work for an organization, what actually is its purpose? What is it doing? It may be causing a lot of harm, and I'd rather not live with that if I can, move out of it. And there are lots of ways in which large organizations these days are causing terrific amount of harm, but we seem to be helpless in the face of their decision making. So I can ask, what impact does this organization have on society? What impact does it have on other creatures, on the environment, on future generations? How is it connected with what others do? Are those connections harmful? Do I know? Because many of us work in organizations that are so enormous and complicated and global that it's very difficult to know what the consequences of one's actions are. They seem to be a million miles away. So after a while, I just give up. So, okay, I go in, I do this. I don't know what it's about. I don't know what it's for. I don't know whether it's good or harm. But I'll just do it. They give me some money at the end of the day. Right? A bit sad, really. That's not how work should be. Do I actually know in a complicated organization what the consequences of my own action are? You see, we're all distanced from the consequences of our action now in our workplace. Take the guy who's flying an airplane over Hiroshima. He doesn't see the people on the ground. He pushes a button and a nuclear bomb, an atom bomb, falls on all those people and kills 200,000 people at once. Children playing. But it doesn't touch him at all because he doesn't see any of it. He's pushed the button, the bomb is gone, and now he's going home. And he's looking forward to having a game of golf when he gets back. Now, is that a weird world to live in or not? Don't we need to be connected with meaningful work? Okay, it does appear that the Buddha mentioned a number of kinds of livelihood which bring harm at once to the workers and to the recipients. And I've written them down here. It's interesting that he would think along these lines at all. What I want to ask you, or we ask yourselves, is these lines of work, are they still to be found in modern society? He was speaking 2,500 years ago, and he's saying, One, don't involve yourself with dealing in weapons in any way. So if you've got a pension and you may want to find out whether that's ethically based or not. Dealing in humans. Now, this is not me speaking now, this is the Buddha speaking, okay? This is dealing in humans. So we were talking about slavery. 2,500 years later, we've abolished slavery, haven't we? No, we haven't. Dealing in meat. Now, I know this is going to be controversial, but ideally, we shouldn't deal in meat, even if we're going to eat the meat. So he's not very keen on butchers, obviously. And dealing in intoxicants, which for the Buddha, given, that his teachings are about mindfulness, he would be doubtful about anything that is interfering with your mind. Any mind-altering drugs, from cocaine and heroin to alcohol, anything that's changing, damaging your mind is not a good idea. It should be obvious, right? So dealing in intoxicants is really promoting that, and poisons. So I would say, this is my view, we're going to open it up in a minute, because I'm just trying to provoke you in some ways into thinking about this. We certainly still recognize some of these in contemporary forms, greatly intensified. So what do we have now? Greatly intensified versions of the things we had 2,500 years ago. So we have a global arms trade. We have human trafficking. We have masses of people underpaid casual labor and child labor. These are things that the Buddha mentioned. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, you'll find it there. Human trafficking, factory farms, alcohol, cigarettes, cocaine, sleeping pills. If you need sleeping pills, that's okay, but if you don't and you're dependent on it, not so good. He also mentioned several dishonest means of gaining wealth. In general terms, practicing deceit, practicing treachery, practicing soothsaying or quackery. He's very, very advanced, is the old Buddha, He mentions also trickery and usury, that is lending at an interest. Now this would completely change the whole economy, wouldn't it? Finally, telling lies and doing harm by means of one's work. And to be positive, the human race, I think, I don't know, what do I know? I've got one little outlook on things. Things are changing in uneven corners of the world. The different attitude to women growing, the different attitude to children, child labor is, the organization is trying to stop that. Racial injustice, that seems to be being challenged again at last. Our attitudes to animals seem to have improved in some ways, but don't forget, we've already exterminated about half the species on the planet, so that's not too good, is it? Another positive is the very concept of a fair wage and pensions for people to support them when they're old. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. We just need more of it. So to conclude, about right livelihood is part of the Noble Eightfold Path. When you go to work, you've not gone into some sort of special area where you take on a new appearance and you have to act in a different way from what you are. You're still a human being being tested sometimes by the unpleasant things, people who are abusive towards you or expecting too much from you or blaming you for something you didn't do. All of this is hurtful. And one thing we're learning from mindfulness is to deal with all that hurt. It's not you. It's not you. It's the way things are put together. but we need to get together in order to deal with that putting together. We have to think more collectively and come out of our little cocoons. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.